they don't actually know you. They're more concerned about what value do you bring to the company? What value would you bring to a partnership? So a lot of young people, and actually this isn't only young people, a lot of people, when they're looking for opportunities with a potential employer or partner, what they tend to do is focus a lot on what is the value for them as a potential employer rather than what is the value for the employer. Hello, my name is Rebecca Hansen and I am a transformational leadership coach. I am based here in Kigali in Rwanda, and I work with organizations, with leaders and entrepreneurs on how to strengthen their leadership. My first internship job was with a marketing agency. I was doing copywriting and supporting e-commerce businesses with their marketing. And one thing I really liked about that internship is that they were incredibly good at utilizing people that they got in as interns. So I got to get a lot of responsibility. I got to have my own clients with connection to an account manager. So I was able to actually provide work. I was able to do things that had an impact. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations miss out on when they hire interns, is that they don't really know how to utilize them very well. They kind of just take them in because, oh, now we have a group of interns and that helps them check some boxes somewhere. And the interns come in and they're too shy to ask for anything important to do. So they're just kind of waiting to be put to work. And it ends up becoming unfulfilling on both ends for both the interns and the organizations that hire them. I think my speaking hasn't really come through a job. My speaking has come through my coaching business and creating content. A lot of people are asking me, what can I do to get into public speaking? I wanna start speaking publicly. I wanna gain my confidence in that. And honestly, nothing works better than experience. Just getting it done. And then when you have the courage to review what it is that you've done and figure out what is it really that you want to work on. Because when we see ourselves from the outside, it becomes easier to see, okay, these are the words that I use a lot that I want to stop using. These are the expressions that I do too much, or maybe I'm waving my hands a lot and I want to stop doing that because it's distracting. Maybe I don't move at all. So you start reviewing yourself and then you just start practicing. And public speaking is really that. It comes with practice. And in today's world with all this content creation, there's nothing that stops you. You can literally just put up a phone if you have access to one, start recording yourself. And then if you feel bold enough to do it, post it on YouTube or on social media and get that feedback from people. I feel like there are definitely similarities. Of course, each country has their own structure, which impacts that a lot. So for example, when I did my internship, it was an unpaid internship, but the government pays me to study. So I was getting paid a monthly stipend from the government while I was in school, while I was studying at the university, which meant that it was easier for me to be able to take on an unpaid internship. And I think what we see in a lot of countries is that because the marketplace demands job experience once you graduate from school, a lot of young people, they want to gain internships while they're in school or figuring out ways to get that job experience so that when they do reach the marketplace and when they're ready to take on a job, they can come and say they've had job experience. Now, what this very often creates is that there's an over demand for young people who want internships in terms of how many internships are actually available in the marketplace. And when you have the demand coming from the intern side, it means that the organizations can negotiate the terms of those internships to the extent that they please, which means that now, again, there's a lot of unpaid internships. Now, when you have unpaid internships in a market where the young people don't have their own income from, for example, the government or from other means that they're able to take on an unpaid internship, which means now they have to pay for their own transport, they have to pay for their own food while they're out. Not everyone is able to do that. And when you have a situation where not everyone can afford to take these unpaid internships, now there's a gap between the people who have the job experience, who's able to do the unpaid internships, and those who don't. And very often the young people who don't have access to these unpaid internships, they simply can't afford to take them. They're usually already in a not very advantageous situation. And you're just strengthening that gap between those who can and those who can't. So I feel like there is an obligation when you do have, there's an opportunity for organizations to just come out and say, we don't pay our interns because we don't have to. But on the other hand, you really help lift up the young people who can't afford those internships if you decide to cover at least the basics, such as transportation and food. And then perhaps also something that they can bring home to their families, because a lot of young people are expected to work at home with their families to support. And when you take away that support, now you're adding pressure on the family at home because they don't have access to that work that they usually do. It can really help if that young person can bring home a bit of cash to the family and say, there's a reason that we're doing this, because that if you have a family who's under a lot of pressure and now they're letting go of a person that has supported that household, what they want is to cover that gap as fast as possible. And that gap can be covered by having that extra bit of stipend, or there's going to be a lot of pressure for that young person to give up the internship so that they can come home and fulfill their family duties. So I would just really encourage organizations, if you're in a position where you can pay your interns, even just to cover the very basics, I would absolutely recommend doing that. It does help a lot of young people who don't have access to this already. And if you're an organization who simply just can't pay those interns, figure out what are other ways that you can kind of compensate for that by giving them really relevant work experience, by making sure that that internship really helps them on the other end, perhaps help them with recommendations or something else that they can use so that when they do get into the marketplace, they're in a better position to land a job. There's a lot of young people who are shy when they get into the marketplace, into the workspace in the beginning, but having a positive attitude, being proactive, showing a willingness to want to do something, showing a willingness to want to learn, showing a willingness to want to implement is going to make the employer more excited about giving you work. Make sure that you understand what is valuable to the employer. So if you get into a job and you know that that employer is there for you to actually gain that work experience and that they want to give you some work experience, if you understand what is valuable to that employer, you're more likely to grab their attention in terms of getting that responsibility, of getting to do things that are really interesting in terms of getting that work experience. So if you show that you're proactive, you have a good attitude when it comes to work, and also you understand what is valuable to the employer, you're much more likely to do really well with your internship, which is more likely to get you recommendations, more likely to land you a job afterwards, more likely to just have a great experience, not just for you, but also for the future. You are representing all of the future interns that they're taking in. So if they have a lot of bad experiences with interns, they're less likely to take in more in the future. But if they have really good interns, if they have really good experience with having interns, then they're more likely to look at ways that they can integrate more interns into their organization moving forward. So just really think about what you're representing, really think about what opportunity is available for you, figure out ways where you can put in that effort to really make a good impression, to gain those work skills. And if you think about what do you want this to look like on your resume, on your CV afterwards, what are the kinds of accomplishments that you would like to show on your resume that would be attractive to a future employer? Think about how can you actually get that done while you're there. So a lot of young people, and actually this isn't only young people, a lot of people when they're looking for opportunities with a potential employer or partner, what they tend to do is focus a lot on what is the value for them as a potential employer rather than what is the value for the employer. So what we see often is people would reach out saying stuff like, I really need a job, or those are my circumstances, and therefore I need to be employed. And if you look at it from the employer perspective, they don't actually know you. They don't really need to be concerned too much about what your experience is in terms of your circumstances of your environment. They're more concerned about what value do you bring to the company? What value would you bring to a partnership? So as much as you might want to work with an organization, it might even be that you're saying, I would love to work with this organization because I've been following them for a long time. You might be reaching out saying, I just love what you do. I would love to be a part of it. But you don't really mention what value do you bring to the table? What value are you bringing to that employer? So a very big mistake that I often see when reaching out is that you're not focused on what is it that makes you desirable to the employer. And this really comes back again to understanding value. It comes back to understanding from their perspective, why would they want to hire you? Not just from your perspective, why would you want to be hired? And that really comes down to what kind of results are you able to bring. Now, it can be really, really difficult to write down results if you're in an organization that doesn't really allow you to do anything else than copy papers and bring in coffee, but then perhaps have a conversation with the person who is responsible for your work at this organization and see, are there any ways that you can support on the projects that are of interest to you and of interest to the organization? How can you provide value?